Thank everyone for attending today's next webinar in the series of Changing the Narrative about Black and Latino young men. And so I'd like to introduce our facilitator for today, Dr. Susan Swayze.
Thank you, Dr. King. I am happy to be here. I'll be introducing each of the panelists, and then they will give their take on how to change the narrative going forward. So let me start first with Fred Gregory. Dr. Gregory is a science and technology visionary that sources scientific opportunity, recommends strategic investments, and leads portfolios of multidisciplinary research with high payoff, as evidenced by IP licensing and applied transitions for the Army Research Office. Dr. Gregory is a confident science communicator that makes complex concepts accessible to audiences of various backgrounds, which includes convincing senior leaders to support strategic investments in high-risk emerging research areas. He is also a collaborative leader that contributes to highly effective teams of international military and academic scientists with professional ties to key opinion leaders at the intersections of life sciences, physics, math, and engineering. Dr. Gregory, can you give us a wave? Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Cunningham. Dr. Cunningham is a graduate of the Princeton University. He has received his PhD in molecular biology from Rockefeller University and completed his postdoctoral training at the Pasteur Institute in Paris, France. Dr. Cunningham is a leading voice in advocating for diversity and representation in the field of genomics. He's a volunteer leader of Future Kings, a nonprofit STEM youth program for underserved communities headquartered in Prince William County and coming to a county near you. Dr. Cunningham previously worked at the Virginia headquarters, at the VA headquarters, sorry, overseeing a large neurodegenerative disease research program, and also served as a subject matter expert for the VA's genomic medicine implementation program. Motivated by the timely need for advancements in precision medicine while at the VA, Dr. Cunningham is dedicated to improving people's lives through the power of genomics. Dr. Cunningham, he gave us a wave. Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce Dexter Cummings, Esquire. Mr. Cummings is an experienced counsel with a demonstrated history of success in providing strategic legal counsel and business guidance to corporate leadership in commercial enterprises, including healthcare, technology, and biotech, nonprofits, and making sustainable social impact. He has a strong legal and business acumen and is skilled in healthcare law, technology, education, business and economic development, social media, regulatory law, and intellectual property, meaning copyrights and trademarks. Thank you, Mr. Cummings, for being here. Could you give us a wave? And last but not least, thank you. Last but not least, we have Eric King. Dr. King is the executive director of the Future Kings program, headquartered in Prince William County, but expanding rapidly. His goal is to create a pipeline of youth from underserved communities into STEM-based careers. His work history of 35 years in computer technology and small business management he has leveraged those to help boys from underserved communities start and successfully operate their own STEM-based businesses and transition into STEM-based majors, and is personally and professionally committed to expanding the STEM workforce pipeline here in Virginia. Dr. King, can you give us a wave? Thank you all for being here. I'm very proud to be part of this esteemed panel. I'm going to be quiet now and will ask one of our panelists to please give their take on what it is required to change the narrative regarding Black and Latino boys. Who wants to go first? Don't be shy.
We didn't draw straws or anything, but we all talk about this a lot. So maybe I can kick us off here. So one of the issues that I think a lot about in this area these days, it's really thinking about Black and Latino boys in the context of the global perspective. And when we think about it more globally, looking outside the US, one of the places where we can look, if we actually look into the US, we can go to the US Senate report from 2016 with respect to the 2016 election and Russian interference in the election. So we've heard a lot about it over the years with respect to how Russia wanted to interfere with Hillary Clinton's prospects to become president of the US. But it doesn't seem that most African Americans in particular, and probably most Americans, don't realize that in that same report, there's also mention of African Americans and how African Americans were targeted specifically as a group within this campaign to disrupt America. And so in a broader context, if we look historically, there's actually a lot of information now. One can, you can all do Google searches and find a lot of this information yourself. But there's actually a long history of involvement of Russia with African Americans, dating all the way back to 1928, when there has been a campaign started to sow distrust by African Americans in the American government. And if we fast forward to today, we see these tactics are still at play. But if we, we can also go to Latino boys, Latinos, and current immigration issues, and we start putting all this together, we see that there's a specific vulnerability, national vulnerability with respect to African Americans and Latinos in this country. And so I'm beginning to think about this problem around a narrative of Black and Latino boys in this broader context that not only affects African Americans or Latinos, but really affects all Americans in the grand scheme, and wanting us to expand the conversation to one that's not just isolated, but that, whether you're a white American or any other racial group in America, this is your issue as well. So pass it on to my colleagues.
I would add to that. And as someone who's had the lived experience of a Black boy growing to a Black man and now a Black STEM professional who's also raising two Black boys who will do, I'm sure amazing things in their careers, the narrative that we've had to combat, particularly in the STEM fields, is that this is just something we don't do as Black people. And I think that's a very dangerous narrative for our country, as Dr. Gregory pointed out, because when you think about where we are as far as a STEM-focused country, many of the STEM innovations that are driven by our country, if we don't have all of our population participating in that ecosystem and benefiting from it economically, as well as driving new innovations in it, then we're not taking full advantage of all of the resources, human resources we have here in America. And that's really our strength. I don't care who you are. If you go all the way back in history, even more recent history, George Washington Carver, one of our most famous Black inventors, think about all of the contributions he made to science. Garrett Morgan, think about all of the contributions he made to engineering and our health and well-being with the stoplight and the gas mask. So you have a long history of this, but that history, that narrative gets subverted quite often because of counterproductive, I would say, tropes about Black and brown boys, that they're dangerous, that they're troublemakers, that they can't perform. We all know that that's not true. We're living evidence also of it not being true. And I think the more opportunity that we provide to Black and brown boys, the more we're going to change that narrative. That's what we've seen with our local programs, like in our STEM programs at Future Kings. And that's why these community-based programs are so important and so powerful, because they're changing the narrative one child at a time. And I think that that's something that if we're able to replicate and really get that message out there that no, Black and brown boys are not flawed. They're not inherently dangerous. They're actually quite talented and have a lot to offer our society and the world, I think that's the direction we need to go. It's going to take all of us, not just Black people, but all of the people out there from different communities to pour into this community that's been typecast in a negative light. That's what I'd say.
And just dovetailing and trying to dovetail on both narratives and discussions my colleagues mentioned, it definitely is a national security issue. One, because we are leaving immense talent on the playing field or on the sidelines and not integrating into the national and geopolitical narrative for and perspective for the United States. So we're leaving the African American, which I always say has been one of the most influential in moving culture and business and even and science forward globally. And that, as my colleagues mentioned, oftentimes is not noted. But we have to start thinking about and talking about the whys and the how. And the why is because of our past and also our present. And so we really need to start thinking about how we can deconstruct that and how we can impact that and to truly change the narrative. I definitely believe, and I'll go to Mr. Gregory's point about geopolitically. I'm involved heavily in a lot of African diaspora and international politics, and let's call it economic development, or trying to do economic development, and that cross-section between economic development and business. And oftentimes, the African-American businesses, the talent that's here, the Mr. Gregory's, Mr. Cunningham's, and people have built businesses and or innovation are oftentimes not given a seat at the table in a meaningful way, or had the diaspora really positioned. And we have a great opportunity right now with the importance of the continent of Africa, and we have the talent to support that. But we need to be able to create the will and also to match it with dollars. So to Shaka's point, it's not because we're not talented. That's been refuted, but it is by, and I'd like to say by design. And we need to call it out when it does happen. And we need to start to be a little bit more strategic in our approach. And Shaka mentioned all of the talented organizations that are out here doing the work. But I think we're missing it on a couple of different fronts. One is the fact that we're all trying to do it alone, or many of us are doing it alone, and not really finding that community or tribe and being collective and strategic in our approach. I think Mr. Gregory makes a very great strategic point that we can center on. I think the community we can center on. And I think we need to really look at the institutions that we're handing over our kids to, and how they view our kids, not just view our kids, but how those organizations are constructed. So for me, I think to change the narrative, we need to play, I'd like to say, multidimensional chess. And we really need to take more of an onus on how we can, as a community, or those, and the we, as Dr. Gregory said, is a collective we. It's a global we. It's all individuals that understand and recognize the challenges and the deficits that racism and the institutions create, and to try to address those collectively and make it all of our problem.
What I'd like to start with is that one of the common themes is that in order to change the narrative about Black and Latino boys, it has to be an intentional effort. It's not the kind of thing that's going to happen through osmosis. It's not going to happen accidentally. We have to make a concerted effort to change. Certainly, there have been other groups who have made a concerted effort to demean our Black and Latino boys. And now it's come a time where it's up to us to change that narrative by being intentional about what we believe exists in our communities. We believe that our young men are talented and gifted and worthy of respect and worthy of the inputs that we put in, that we would like to put into them. We need to continue to be intentional about what we are saying about our beliefs, not to just let it happen and let it show forward, but to each day make concrete steps in order and be sensitive to the facts that are critical if we're going to be changing the narrative about our boys. One of the things I could say is that all the panelists are board members of Future Kings. They're not the kind of people who are just sitting back and waiting for someone else to do it. They have made a concerted effort to band together in a positive way to affect changing the narrative about Black and Latino boys. For people who are not familiar with the Future Kings organization, we are a STEM platform that is teaching college level topics to Black Latino boys primarily who are in secondary school. And we're able to teach that by using the expertise of our chambers in order to make that advanced content reachable for students who are in secondary school. There is a conscious effort at recreating the knowledge transfer between those who know and those who need to know in order to affect that information base that our young men need as they're preparing themselves for life after high school. So that STEM-based platform, which is teaching cybersecurity, computer game design, biomedical sciences, and drone engineering, teaching college level topics, but doing it to young men in secondary school, is a solid initiative toward being able to prove that our young men can succeed at the highest levels if we find ways to communicate with them in an effective way. And one of the things that we believe is that by doing this, it gives these young men a tremendous advantage when they go into their post-high school careers, whether those post-high school careers be in college or directly into the workforce, that by affecting a modern and easily workable knowledge transfer between our experienced and highly capable instructors and these young men who are being exposed to topics which are well beyond their years, that we are able to properly prepare them for the competition that they'll face once they leave high school. So from the Future Kings perspective, we are aggressively being intentional about what we're doing to change the narrative about our young men.
I just want to reiterate a few of the points that I've heard, and I know a little bit also about your stories and your efforts, but we have a situation where our youth that look like us, that live near us, that we want to see have different experiences, are often overlooked as individual talent, often served by under-resourced institutions, and are often maligned based on bias and not on actual one-on-one experiences with them as persons. So I know some of the work that you all are part of, and how can each individual on the call or later on when they view this as recording on YouTube, what can an individual do to help move the needle to change perceptions about Black and Latino boys?
Well, I'll start that part of the conversation because I think everybody has a role to play. It's not just up to the Black community to help change the narrative because the Black community didn't implement that narrative, right? We've had decades of historical systemic racism that we're fighting upstream against. So I would say, just like we saw a few years ago with the George Floyd situation, where there was a bit of an awakening by, I would say, the white community about some of these historical inequities that the Black community had been talking about. And then all of a sudden, a lot more white individuals became advocates and started talking about advocacy and actually doing it, marching, going out, protesting, and trying to level the playing field from a criminal justice perspective. And I think that needs to go on here. I think everyone needs to take a deep look at whatever unconscious bias they may have, particularly if you're in an area of power over individuals or in hiring power or in education. Check yourself, literally, what are your biases? And make sure that you're not using those biases to typecast Black and brown boys in a negative way. And I think in addition to that, so everyone being an advocate, right? Parents included, parents of non-minority children, everyone being an advocate. And then creating opportunities for young minority males to show their excellence, giving them opportunities to gain skills that have often been kept from them. So I look at my discipline, biomedicine, you don't see many African-American males, particularly in the field, because historically it hasn't been enabled. So how do we create mechanisms like we do it with Future Kings Biomedicine to give children, literally sixth graders, exposure to very advanced topics in biomedicine so that as they progress through their careers, they're more familiar with it. I'll use the analogy of Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods is great at golf, but he's great at golf because his dad put a golf club in his hands when he was 1 year old, right? And he'd been playing by the time he turned pro for 20 years, right? So it gave him the framework to achieve excellence. Now, he went on to put in the hard work and to keep demonstrating that excellence, but he had the framework and opportunity in order to do that. It's the same thing in these STEM disciplines. And the earlier that we can get these young men who have been marginalized, engaged and aware of the opportunities for them to show their excellence in these fields, the better off we're all going to be.
I'll kind of chime in on that as well. Now, and I echo everything that Shaka has said. And for me, it's always about the how, right? And the enabling and encouraging happens every day as an individual. You, as seeing myself, as I was growing up, always looking for a mentor, not necessarily finding that connection. I try every day to try and foster those connections and look for those opportunities to give a guiding hand, some information to any young person that I come in contact with. So I try to live that every day. And it's not just about Black and brown, but it is about all folks, right? All people. And but I am discreetly and unapologetically focused on Black and brown, and particularly Black. One, because I think all of the problems and challenges that America has, or we have globally, rests at our feet and we absorb every day. And so the challenge for me is always about to see where the opportunity lies for our kids. And our kids are very, very smart, resilient, and innovative, but they also come with a whole set of challenges that comes from their circumstance or most of the majority of their community. And oftentimes when we talk about STEMs, we're looking at the elite students or the students that transcend, right? And I want us to start looking at the group of students who can't, but for their circumstance or but for the educational system, as was pointed out, aligns and puts them behind, even when they decide that they want to get into STEM. And you look at the performance level, Black versus white, of D students, C students, and how many of those folks progress. There's a marked difference. And we know that it exists. The question becomes, what do we do in response to it? And not necessarily from an educational standpoint, the educational system standpoint, but from a human standpoint. What do we do as human beings and Black folks to be able to create that support network where we're doing a better job? Even with our HBCUs, the graduation rates or the retention rates, we have to do better. And there has to be something. And I think where it all starts for me, or where it lands, and I want to talk a little about the innovation piece, because I think in solving those problems and the problems around us, we have the innovation. And if we figure out the business model around those innovations and how to and to do it differently in a non-extractive way, in a way that's more, I won't say egalitarian, but more collective. I think those are the business models that are sustainable for our communities and communities that sit where we sit. And for as far as the individual, I think it all starts with, and I have to attribute this to my conversations with my daughter, who's a PhD student at UNLV, and who started me along this walk around looking at the perspective of the child and centering everything on the person who is receiving the activity or action. So everything that we do is based on our perception of what stimuli or activities that goes on around us. And so that perception, not only of self, but of the stimuli, what happens in the educational system, has an impact. And I know Dr. Gregory knows more about this than I do, and how it impacts people, how different those experiences impacts the brain, the thinking, and how we respond individually or as a person. And it impacts our perception of ourselves, our universe, and then how we move through that universe and our ability to have success. And I think if we start being more attuned to that and understanding that each child's perspective is different and unique, and we have to create the environments where we're empowering them and getting them to think of themselves in different ways and understanding their place in the universe, and that they kind of have some control around it and their circumstance, not just from an action, reaction, or opportunity perspective, but intimately in understanding who they are and who they feel like they want to be and what they can be, and the type of life that they want to live. And I think once we center it on the individual, individually and collectively, and even on the in terms of how we build our communities, I think we have a better chance of advancing and getting the types of things not only that we deserve, but that's possible. And I think we need to allow ourselves to think about what's possible more, and not necessarily what is and what others think that we ought to be. So so that would be my focus, and on the how, and trying to get that imbued in more and more programs and the collective approach.
Yeah, these are really great points. And to push it even further, and maybe even a slightly different direction. One of the issues that we kind of notice, specifically for Shaka and myself, having kind of grown up in biomedical sciences together, and having the benefit of experiencing all sorts of educational programs, specifically devoted to training African Americans and Latinos to do what we did, go get a PhD in biomedical sciences and to become leaders in biomedical sciences. But when I kind of look back at it, for the most part, we would have made it anyway. We kind of, even though I grew up in the crack cocaine era, raised by my great grandparents, in a community that was, devoured by, by what was going on, that local economy, that affects many today, a lot of our communities today, but, for somehow I made it through and got to the place where, I was able to benefit from programs like Tashaka and myself. We were UNCF Merck fellows together and benefited from the, programs like that. But when you really think about this problem, each of us, if we could look back, how many brothers and sisters did we leave behind? We really think we are the minority. We've been very successful, and we have friends. We know hundreds of other people that look like us, Black and brown people that look like us, that are also successful, but we're still all the minority. And I think somehow in the narrative, we need to work toward this idea of, we need other people to be advocates for us, but how do we become advocates for ourselves? You know, how do we do this within our communities? You know, how do we not depend on others? You know, and one of the, and I think with the, in specific to Future Kings, this discussion around us here, creating greater opportunities to enable the ones who wouldn't necessarily be, you know, make it on their own. You know, I think that's where, because we see all of a lot of our organizations, which are very beneficial, like we said, the ones we've experienced, they definitely got me to where I am today. I couldn't have done this without them. But programs like Future Kings are, and one, not only looking for people who wouldn't necessarily make it on their own, but looking lower in the pipeline. By the time we're in college or graduate school, you know, we've made a significant barrier, you know, made it through a significant barrier in life, you know, and have a greater opportunity for success. But it's at these, you know, specific to this conversation around boys, this is that period in life where a lot of the decision-making skills, all those life skills that one needs to be in a place to accept all that life has to offer, to do all the hard work, you know, stay diligent, you know, suffer through, do all the things that it takes to do this. We need more efforts that focus toward boys, and particularly this type of environment where boys are around men who look like them in particular. You know,
Yeah.
Look around and, you know, look at their communities and touching communities in ways that you now start to see yourself in this new way.
I think that's so important, Dr. Gregory, and it's precisely that inflection point that I think every young man gets to. You're making me think about my childhood when I grew up in inner city DC, in a community that was ravaged by drugs, and some of my colleagues didn't make it out. My friends, some of them got murdered, some of them went to jail. I'm the only one that took the particular path that I did, but others did get out and other successful career paths. And what I see is the difference is that inflection point. You know, if you look at the data, I came from a single parent home. When I was younger, my mother was on welfare. And even though she was in university, she was taking care of me through public assistance, which oftentimes does not lead to the outcome that I've experienced in life. And some of the differentiating factors were adults in my life that sowed into me that I had greatness within, and exposure to opportunities in science and training due to the fact that I had a grandparent who worked in research. I was lucky. My grandmother worked in a lab at the NIH at a time. She was like a hidden figure type of person. This was a time before Black women were allowed to really get PhDs. So particularly in her discipline. So the early exposure that I got helped me stay on a path and showed me I had potential and talent in a very complex discipline. And that stayed with me throughout my life. So part of what I try to instill in our Future King students is exactly that you have potential and you can gain knowledge that will make you stand out and be a top performer at university. And I have to tell you, it has been the joy of my life to be a part of this program, and now have graduated 3 students from our biomedical track and had them gone on to top universities and major in biomedical fields and do well. That's amazing to me. I see the future right there in those young men, knowing when I got them, they had never been in a laboratory before. They had never been exposed to biomedicine. And so the learning that took place from our continued engagement and the example that I was for them and what I represent for them is real. And we need more of that. And so I'll just wrap that piece up by saying that in order to get more of that, we need more resources, quite frankly. I think programs like ours can scale with proper resources to allow these experiences for more youth. I've seen the transformational effects. People, young men coming in with low confidence and low ability, leaving with high confidence and extremely high ability, and then going on to Ivy League and other schools in this country. So these are going to be the ways that we change that narrative one child at a time and just increase the opportunities for us to do that in broader communities.
And just
And
to
if I,
emphasize that point a little bit more, Shaka, is when we talk about resources, certainly cash is at the very top of that resource totem pole. Organizations like us, boots on the ground doing things, are typically under-resourced and have to decide how much service we can provide based on how much revenue we have available to us. So cash is always an outstanding contribution to programs like ours, and it's certainly at the top of the resource chain. But also information is another resource. Having advocates in the C-suites for the various larger corporations who can talk about the importance of supporting this narrative about changing Black and Latino boys, have them look into our communities and begin to sow support into their, whether it be their professionals, whether it be the types of visualization that Shaka was just talking about, or whether it be allowing them to come in and see some of the advanced technologies that are in the futures. There are a lot of different resources which help programs like ours, which go beyond just cash. Not to minimize cash, and certainly that's a big part of it, but there are all types of resources that we can contribute in order to change the narrative about these Black and Latino boys.
and if I may, Dr. Swayze, just take a little brief moment to echo what and to support what Eric just said, and also Shaka and Fred. The challenges for us is in the business model, right, of where we sit. And if Future Kings does everything that I talked about before, giving kids the opportunity to see people who can be mentors. They have continuous access to mentors. And then they also have the positive reinforcement of self, right? And the opportunities to reflect. But at the same time, the resource question and the modeling question of how do we scale and how do we get this to as many communities and people as possible is always met with the same answer. Well, you need to align with this particular group, or a particular group that's going to be the one that ends up being the gatekeeper for the capital. And it's happened to us. It's happening in Virginia, and I've seen this model not just in Future Kings, but it's happening with Black talent, I should say, right, in Black excellence at each and every threshold. I've experienced it in law, where you need to be at a certain threshold, or you need certain gatekeepers in order to be able to pass on to the next step. And it can only be one or two, right? And that's the challenge. So the question becomes, how do we create sort of a mesh network, if you will, right, of opportunity and for us to be able, so what people can do who are watching is think about how they can collaborate and work with One Future Kings, how they can resource groups like Future Kings, but not just necessarily on an individual basis, right? But to think about models where collectively, right, we can expand the base of capital, right, and resources that that organizations have access to, because the numbers, the kids that are being serviced by individual organizations across the spectrum, and that's what Future Kings is trying to do, really, right, is to put that mesh network together so that we can be able to marshal greater resources. And I think that if anyone out there is interested in that, they need to talk to Dr. King, they need to call Shaka, they need to call Greg, they need to call me, and definitely Dr. Swayze, and we can figure it out. Because we have, like I said, again, and I think other organizations have similar things, but we have access to some of the top organizations that like what we do. But to get to the scale, we're really going to need that collective approach.
Can I put some perspective on this? Because I want to add my perspective as a African-American entrepreneur in the biotech space. I spend a lot of time looking at funding and funding trends, and I see a lot of parallels in the nonprofit sector with the for-profit sector when it comes to minority-led organizations. So let me just give you an example. There was over 400 billion in venture capital funding that was dispensed by investors last year. African-American founders got 1.2% in 2021, and that amounted to roughly 1.2 billion, okay? And of that 1.2 billion since 2021, now 2022, it's now down to a quarter of that, 324 million. So let's put that in perspective. One of the wealthiest people in the world, Jeff Bezos, just said that he's going to give away his entire fortune but in his lifetime, which is roughly 124 billion. So 1% of Jeff Bezos's fortune could fund all of the Black entrepreneurs for last year, and 4 times as many Black entrepreneurs as were funded in 2022. Okay, so keep that in perspective. 1% of that net worth. So there's capital around. If they wanted to fix that problem, that's easily fixable. You only have a set number, finite number of entrepreneurs that need funding, that got funding. That's a fixable problem. Same thing I see in the nonprofit sector. There are very few grassroots organizations, I think, that have had the level of success of Future Kings with the small level of budget. So when I look at what we could be doing with resources commensurate to what we're bringing to the table as an organization, that's the part that gets me really excited. And I'm hoping that funders will see that and be able to commit significant enough resources to help build the infrastructures in our organizations and organizations like Future Kings to help them scale, because we need more of this activity, not less, because we're leaving a lot of talent and ability on the table with the status quo.
And on that, it's solving this problem about changing the narrative goes beyond just social justice. The things that Shaka was saying was absolutely true. But I think that another reason to invest in groups like us is we are actually part of the solution to solving national problems. We know that we need a lot more STEM professionals in the field. We know that we're underrepresented in practically every discipline. And so many times that's because people who are doing the recruiting are not looking at us, they're looking at other people. And part of that is just because we don't have the funding to really get our name out there. When I was in private business before the nonprofit, one of our adages is that people did business with people who they knew, who they liked, and who they trust. And if we can't get our word out there, people don't know about us, so they can like us and so they can trust us, we're always going to be a deficit. And it's not just us, there are certainly other groups as well. So another one of the concrete, practical things that we can say is support Future Kings and other groups like us, because to get from where we are to where we can be in order to solve national problems about a under-resourced and growing need for STEM professionals, you need to be able to know about us, you need to get to like us, you need to be able to trust us so we can be part of that solution to national problems that we have in practically every STEM discipline.
Can we quickly talk about why STEM? It's obvious to me, of course, but why STEM as a major, but also why STEM as a skill set? Go.
Yeah. So Shaka brought up a great point about entrepreneurship, which I think kind of elevates the conversation around STEM, and broadly around training, boys, girls, everyone. So we typically think about it, we think about college as an example. We think about college, like your major at college to get a job, which is a mistake. We shouldn't be thinking about, school in terms of necessarily a job per se, but I think you pointed out it's the skills. Like, what are the skills that one can attain to create the future that they want for themselves? And sometimes that future should involve entrepreneurship as a path. Why STEM is so important. I mean, we're obviously biased as STEM professionals, but I think it's even we can put this in a broader context. If we just kind of look historically, today we are at the dawn of the fourth industrial revolution. We've all heard of industrial revolutions in the past, and as Shaka mentioned, several Black inventors, they were creating their inventions during the first Industrial Revolution when African Americans were, deep in slavery. Second Industrial Revolution right around, the end of slavery, Jim Crow. Third Industrial Revolution in the 60s. Every time there's an industrial revolution, there are winners and losers in the economy. There's economic opportunities, not only for individuals, but for a nation to create their future. And I mean, just with that trajectory of industrial revolutions, we're moving closer and closer to eras where technology is primary. It's the key. It's the key to economic independence and dominance, really, in the world from an American perspective. So this need for STEM professionals that, every president, as long as I've been alive, I remember saying, oh, we need more STEM professionals, even especially Obama, Trump, now Biden, we need more STEM professionals, because we know as a nation without STEM, like we can't maintain our, preeminence in the world. And to Shaka's point early on from the beginning, we need full participation in that endeavor. We need people from all walks of life, from all parts of the country, geographically, racially, all across all divides, to participate in this, because it is of such vital importance to a nation.
Yeah.
I
Shaka, I'm gonna let you close it out, man. I'm gonna let you close it out.
let me
Let me jump in here, because I know you're gonna give us the stuff that we really need, right? And I'm gonna go left on us a little bit. But so why STEM is because STEM solves, addresses, and is a tool that's going to be or is being used to solve problems, right? Earth's and people's problems. Earth, water, climate, I mean, you name it, right? That's where we are right now. That's the only thing that's left. And for the business community, we're in information, right? We're in technology, information, and solving those tremendous problems, right? For our existence. And so that's one of the reasons why kids and people, all people really are going to be thrusted and are faced with STEM. I am, as an attorney, I talk about wanting to do business. Well, you know what? We're biotech is it. It's going to be it's solving problems. And ultimately it comes down to the atomic level, molecular level, and our understanding of our universe, right? And so as well as and as part of that, we have, Mr. Gregory, Dr. Gregory, the understanding of humanity, right? And human beings and the brain and how it all works, comes together. So those things are constant. We can talk about philosophy and how that plays into it, but that's another conversation, right? And how all those things sort of converge. But I think the reason why STEM is because it gives you the tools to really understand your universe and your place in it, right? And it gives you the tools to also create or design your own where you end up in that universe. It gives you a powerful tool. So that's and that sense of, I won't say power, but that sense of control or understanding of your place in it really does empower students and empowers people. And so that's why we need, and that has been kept away from our community for a long time, and either directly or by our own, design or our own efforts. But the folks here know, and I think more people know, that it's central for not only our individual success and well-being, but it's also meaningful, important for us as a country, and I'll say geopolitically, and as a planet. And I'll just throw the race thing out the window, because it doesn't matter, right? Except for what our history, has it's ancient history, right? And so, and the fact that moving forward, we're going to have a planet that's the most populous continent is going to be a lot of brown people, okay? And that has to be dealt with. And I won't go into detail about that, but that's the context of where we are right now. So that's why STEM matters. That's why it matters for STEM, for brown and Black people, and for us as a planet.
So I agree with all of that, with the exception of racism being ancient history. It's actually current. Unfortunately, we're still grappling with it. It's been around a long time, and it's like a disease. I look at it like smallpox, right? It's like a disease that we haven't figured out how to really fix. Now, we figured out a vaccine for smallpox. I think if we put all of our best minds and hearts to it, we'll figure out how to cure racism one day as well. And maybe one day, I am hopeful that we'll get to Martin Luther King and others' dreams that, you know, will be viewed by the content of our character, not the color of our skin, all of us. But why STEM? Your question, Dr. Swayze, I think that's so important. And the points were made, because to meet the challenges of the day and of the future, we are going to need to have advanced technology innovation. And if you look at it from an economic sense, as Fred mentioned, where are the billionaires being made? Are they being lawyers, or are they being Tesla manufacturers? Are they being oil engineers, or are they being computer scientists that are creating platforms, right? So when you look at the challenges we've had recently, even the pandemic, what was the most, desired and needed skill for us to get through the pandemic? Biomedicine. We needed people to know how to work with RNA and make messenger RNA vaccines. People who have been working for decades in obscurity, but their knowledge and expertise became paramount. I'll point out one hidden figure in this, person of color, Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett, who was working at the NIH Vaccine Research Center, was instrumental in helping get some of these trials done of these vaccines, these mRNA vaccines that kept our population safe. So doctors like Dr. Kizzmekia are unsung heroes in the African-American community, and for all African-American boys and girls should be a role model and an example of what you can do with the STEM education, okay? So I look at all of these instances in STEM as opportunities, and what we have to figure out how to do as a society is how do we enable our children to take advantage of those opportunities and become uber productive members of society, driving not only innovation in our country from all angles and from all communities, but economic opportunity, okay? The Elon Musks of the world, the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, their wealth creating opportunity as they allow it and as they're able to dispense to causes like these. So I'd love to see some of those kinds of individuals come from our community. I know the talent is there. Are we creating the opportunity, the training, and then the access to capital at pivotal moments for them to be able to become these entrepreneurs, innovation, drivers of innovation, and folks that help change our society for the better? So that's what we all need to do for our children of color to really make sure that they're able to participate and add to that ecosystem.
And Susan, lots of times we talk about STEM, the science, the technology, the engineering, and the mathematics. We tend to think of it in terms of a silo of either science or technology or engineering or mathematics. But there are tremendous opportunities for cross-curricular projects. And so that in Future Kings, we've had more than one project that was cross-curricular in the sense that it combined both science and technology, or science, technology, and math, or science, technology, engineering, and math, and combine all those together into one new solution. So the STEM provides lots of various perspectives on either certain industries or in completely new industries that represent a convergence of a number of different silos into an entirely new industry. And if you want to take advantage of the future, the best way to do it is by inventing that future. And we are providing opportunities for our kids to invent the future by understanding the foundations of all those of all the advancements that we're about to see in the near future. And as far as Bezos, I remember when he was selling books as a website, and that was his only business, selling books on Amazon. And from there to where he is now, it's only possible because of the assets that he had. I think that so many of our students as well, given opportunities and support, can reach that Bezos level.
Okay, we are in our last few minutes, and I wanted to make sure that everyone has a parting thought, whether it's one action you think that someone should take today, a quote that you think will inspire them as we close out. But I would like to have everyone have one last thing to say, and Dr. King, you will have the last word. Dr. Gregory?
I guess I can end on the notion of scaling impact and the need to take models that work. We can demonstrate expertise and excellence. We need to find ways to scale those impacts and leveraging the systems around us to enable. So looking for opportunities to do that through programs like Future Kings. We think that's the way to go. And we need help to do that. That's the other thing. We definitely need help.
Thank you, Dr. Cunningham, for your insights. And thank you, Dr. Gregory, for your insights. Next to you, Dr. Cunningham, I'm going around my screen.
Okay, can you see my screen right here?
Yeah, yes.
Donate, right? Future Kings, everybody, give a little bit. Whatever you were going to give, it goes towards the programs. It helps us out. It helps us be able to scale and improve. Visit our website, futurekings.org, donate. We're a 501c3 nonprofit that's doing the work on the ground. Your donation is tax deductible. So please donate. That's what everyone can do locally. And then donate your time. So donate whatever resources you decide, but then please donate your time. If you're a STEM professional, or just if you're an adult that cares about children and their development and wants to be a positive force in our local community here, please join us in the effort. We'll find ways to put you to work. We've got a lot of things that we need help with. So I would say, specifically if you're a STEM professional in the disciplines that we are engaged in, cybersecurity, computer game design, custom engineering, and biomedicine, contact Dr. King, find out how you can get your background check and get involved with the exciting programs and sow into the lives of these young people, okay? And then please encourage everyone in your network to donate. If we really had the collective mentality, the Kuja Shagalea, as we call it, in Kwanzaa speak, then we would all do great. And so I would really love for everybody to donate and support our programs.
Thank you, Dr. Cunningham. On to you, the esteemed Mr. Cummings.
Thank you very much. I got involved in the program because Dr. King took time out to help my daughter with 7th grade math. And that started, and I looked to help him in return, right? With, incorporating program or help with Future Kings, his dream. And I think that's where it really starts, as Shaka noted. And, that's something that we can all do. Yes, we want you to give to the program, but we really want you to also think about what you can do individually in your community, around your community, and also to more importantly, reach out to us and see how we can help you all with what's happening in your community. So the collective work and collective impact that we can have is what I think I'd like to leave you with, and to really get you to focus on the fact that individually it's really difficult for us to get the catalyst capital and also to build the network that's needed. But I think if we really make an effort to reach out and to focus on models that are collective in nature, that we'll all be better off and be able to make the impact that we want to have.
Thank you, sir. And Dr. King, the final word is yours as I say goodbye. I'm just going to wave off. Dr. King, the final words are yours.
I would just like to say that in order to change the narrative, we have to be intentional. So many times it is easy to think that someone else is going to do it, or think that things are going to just get better over time. And what I think all of us are saying is that it doesn't get better naturally. It gets better because people are taking concerted and specific steps in order to make it better. I'm so proud to be in an organization that has 3 guys like this on our board of directors, a common vision, a common theme, a common standard of purpose, and that helps us to keep our mission pure. So intentionality is my buzzword for today, and I think that as long as we are intentional about what we're doing, we can change the life trajectory of millions of young Black and Latino adolescent boys who are in great need of the supports that we can provide for them.
With that, we'd like to conclude and thank you all for being here today and sharing your insights with our audience. Thank you.
You.